start to think a little bit about this topic of what's your story, your lockdown story, and do share your stories in the chat as we go through this. Do help us to know a bit more about your story as we explore other people's stories together. We've been asking various groups, including the Additional Needs Alliance that we spoke about just now, what some of their lockdown stories would be. And we've also picked up some videos that the Methodist Church have been producing that shares a little bit of a glimpse of some of the lockdown stories of folk with children who, for all kinds of reasons, are children with additional needs, or who are being supported in different ways. So as we start to think about this topic of what your lockdown story might be, we're just going to very quickly share some thoughts and some ideas that have been coming through from folk across the country as they share their stories with us. And one mum shared the story of her and her child's engagement with new wine, and found that to be an amazing blessing. And as you can see on the screen, there's a picture of her daughter with a craft activity that she's made as part of what New Wine have been doing. She said New Wine online was just brilliant. We camped in the garden for the authentic experience, and with accessible options and even a printable specifically designed for the Our Space kids, it really felt as if we'd been thought of and loved. Some really positive stuff in there, and let's hang on to some of those thoughts as we go through our time together, because this mum goes on to encourage us even more by sharing a picture that taken of the space that they created in Playmobil that reminded her daughter of the space that she was able to access previously in Our Space. And so the mum says, we created New Wine in Playmobil for the kids to enjoy, complete with a campsite, main stage, music group and kids area. And then my daughter fetched her tray of kinetic sand and set it up at the back of the kids area, and then took one of the figures and placed them there. And she says because she was finding the stage a bit much, she was remembering the sensory area available to her at her group at Real Life New Wine, and she loves that she was making it available to her Playmobil people as well. So yeah, that's great, isn't it? That her daughter remembered that good experience, remembered that positive experience, and was able to bring that into the online world and be able to share that and use that there. And so that's great. So we asked loads of people what their experience of lockdown is, and we'll send out a more detailed pulling together of a lot of that after this session. But we captured some of the key words that people had shared with us, and those keywords appear on the screen. And there's, as you can see, there's good stuff, and then there's not so good stuff. So, you know, what has lockdown been like for you? Well, for some it's been horrendous. It's been lonely, it's been anxious, it's been exhausting, it's been trying. For some, well, they've been resilient. They found it quite good, even great. So it's a mixed bag, and we had some really different thoughts coming through from folk on both sides of that particular paradigm. You know, is it something that's been okay, or is it something that's been really, really hard? Mentioned that we've got some videos too, and we're going to play a short one now. Each of these videos is sort of 1 to 2 minutes long, so not very long, but they capture a little thought each time about what lockdown's been for a particular family that you'll hear over each of these little video clips. So the first one, and all of these feature a mum called Esther, and her daughter Florence is in the video, but she also talks about her son Henry as well. So here's the first one, which is their experience of lockdown.
So I'm Esther, and I have a daughter called Florence and a son called Henry and a husband called Chris. And Florence in particular, she's severely autistic and has learning difficulties.
And here is Florence.
And here is Florence. She's taken a photo of Nicole at the bottom of the screen because she's not seen her before. So she wants to have a photo. But once she's had that photo, she'll be really happy. Quick, that's it. Off you go. Good girl. And so we find church really difficult to go to normally. And we've actually found lockdown. It's been a blessing for me and the family. For myself mainly as well, because I can get to access church individually at a time, either at the time or later on, or at a time where I know I've got some peace and I can do that. But also for the kids. Lady. Also for the kids. Lindsay's a lady. Yes, it's Lindsay. Okay. Yes. Also for the children, because Florence in particular, she gets really anxious about going to church. In fact, I probably couldn't put her in a Sunday school, or those sorts of situations would be quite difficult for her. So she gets to access church online, and that means that she gets to be involved. And also for Henry, it's really important for him too, because he gets to feel that he's got this family with him, whereas often enough he'll come to church but he's on his own, so he gets to come with the family all together. So it's really important for him too.
So some really interesting thoughts there from Esther, positive thoughts about what church online has meant for them. They've been able to participate in it as a family. They've been able to come together and have found it really helpful. So in what other ways has church supported families and helped with the child's faith development? Well, again, we asked the Additional Needs Alliance group for their thoughts on this, and we got, again, a mixed response. Lots of comments coming through that were not so positive, saying that church had done absolutely nothing. They'd not heard from their church. The energy wasn't there in the resources that were being provided. Whereas others were more positive, more encouraging. They were saying that, yeah, you know, they've done online kids church, and that was good. There was weekly material being provided. They were doing storytelling. They were doing Zoom craft, and in some cases they were even providing meals to help and support families. So again, a mixed bag, lots of differences between different families' experience of what lockdown has meant for them and what church involvement has meant for them. Let's hear again from Esther as she shares her and her family's thoughts about this too.
If I say the quiet moments, because they don't get many in this house, but it feels like we've been in a bubble, and that bubble it's been an interesting journey through that bubble. So you can go through all different emotions throughout one week to the next, one day to the next, one moment to the next, and it's difficult. And I think I've had to connect with God on more throughout the day than I've done before, because it's more I'm not out and about doing my busy things anymore. I'm sort of here. I'm having to sort of focus on family life and myself and go on a bit of a journey with me. And so I think that makes that's made me reconnect with God a lot more than I did before. And also it was more of a once a week thing, whereas now I'm connecting online throughout the week. There's things happening all the time, so it seems that if I'm needing that sort of support, I can find it quite easily. It seems to be there all the time. So yeah, I get to connect a lot more.
So again, some really interesting thoughts from Esther, that actually she's been feeling more connected to God because it's not just been a once a week experience of going to church. She's actually been connecting with God in her life in all different kinds of ways, and expressing that for her children too. And so church and having various activities going on during the week has really helped her to be able to connect in different ways there too. What else could church do to support families and help with a child's faith development? Again, another question that we asked the Additional Needs Alliance group. And overwhelmingly, a lot of it was around talk to us, connect with us, get in touch with us, check on my children, make it personal, help us to belong. Lots of families that are needing church to reach out to them and to connect with them, and they're not feeling that so much at the moment. So, ask, not assume. Don't just think, well, we know what families need, but actually ask families and help families to be able to express that for themselves. We asked where else they'd found support and what did it look like. And many families had either found help through other Facebook groups or through activities like Spring Harvest and New Wine, YouTube church services. Some had found help out in the secular world through their local authority, through school, through play schemes. Some had relied on family, friends. Some hadn't found anything at all. So again, a real mixed bag of different ways that people had connected with others and found support or not. There was this great comment that we received that we just wanted to share in full because it really encapsulated a lot of what a lot of the parents were sharing as they connected with us and answered the questions. Notice us. We will always cope and be okay because we don't have any other choice. See beyond the bravado and offer us something to make sure we know you're taking us with you. It could be as simple as noticing that someone isn't at church and calling them to check that everything is okay. Things are tough. Drop your sermon notes round with a cappuccino sachet and a cake, so that parents can take 5 and do church together. Mostly though, just notice us. A real call there on behalf of families for church to notice and connect with and engage with and link with those families that are struggling. Let's give a final brief word to Esther as she just reflects on what online church has meant for her.
Sometimes it's not a choice. We just can't go to church. I try to go, I want to go. I just sometimes I'm needed at home. And so for me, it's been really special. It feels like I finally get to go to church. So to take that away for me would mean that you're taking church away from me. That's how I feel at the minute about it, and for the family. So I really hope these online church services, they stay. They mean a lot to me, actually.
Quite a final word there from Esther. Don't take online church away, because that is her church. That is her way of engaging with church. Really powerful. Important for us to remember that as we carry on through our session. So we're going to have the first of our 3-way thinking conversations now, and it's going to be myself, Kay, and Debbie, who's joining us from Home for Good. So I'm going to unshare and give Kay the opportunity to introduce this section and introduce Debbie a little bit more.
Yeah, it's an absolute privilege to have Debbie with us. She is the chair of the Impression, I think they call it, of Home for Good in Leicester. does a fabulous job, and I've had the privilege of knowing her all her life, and I know she's got an awful lot of wisdom to share. But first of all, we hand over to Mark.
Brilliant. And so, as we start thinking about in the home and how we can practically support families and equip them to support their child spiritually, there's probably a step back from that we need to take right at the beginning, because for so many families, just getting through the day is a win in of itself. 1 in 5 children and young people in the UK have an additional need of some kind. So this is an experience for many, many families, 1 in 5 families across the UK. 1 in 5 children is about 2.5 million across the UK as a whole. So this is something that's really widespread and is important for a lot of families, and therefore for a lot of churches. And so thinking about that and thinking about how for many families just getting through the day, just making sure that everybody's fed, maybe dressed, and got through the day in one piece is a win. So trying to get families thinking about how to spiritually feed and encourage their children, it's really, really hard. Just think of some of the words that families use that we looked at just now to describe their current situation during lockdown. They use words like horrendous, exhausting, anxious, lonely, finding things really, really tough. That many of them are struggling. They really are just managing to get through the day at best. Kind of reminds me, when I think about this from a church point of view, of a story that a friend of mine from up in Hamilton in Scotland shared with me a couple of years ago. They were just at the beginning of the Scottish school summer holidays and had 6.5 weeks of holiday ahead of them. The twins that they have then were about 9, now they're 11. Both of the twins are autistic and have a range of other additional needs and disabilities too. They had no respite provision available for them throughout that holiday period, and they knew that they were going to struggle with the 24/7 needs of the twins. And so they reached out to their church and said, is there anything that you could do that could help us during this really tough time? And their church stepped up magnificently, did what all good churches do in a crisis. They baked. So there was lots of cake and quiche produced, lots of food brought around, but they did other practical stuff as well. Like they came round and child-minded the twins so that mum and dad could just get out for a bit and take a breather. They took the twins on trips. They got shopping in for the family. They just checked in on them and said, are you okay? How are you doing? And it got this family through that summer holiday. Now, some of those things are harder to do right now, but some of them we can still do. We can still check in with families. We can still get shopping in for them. We might even have the opportunity to socially distance, do a little bit of support for them in some way. And so thinking of the practical ways that we can help families just to cope with life right now is really, really important. So, and to understand that actually families of all shapes and sizes, whether chaotic or organized, whether collapsing under the strain or resilient. Remember, resilient was a word that came out in what we got back from families. They're all normal families. These are all the experiences of lots of families. And I know from personal experience that it's possible to be resilient and have it all together and be organized one day, and then the next day it all comes crashing down. One tiny thing can prove to be too much and everything can change. And what we also know, because the stark statistics are out there, is that well over half of families that have a child with a disability or additional needs experience relationship difficulties and breakups. And so, when we're thinking about practical ways to support families, let's think that there will be 2-parent families and 1-parent families. There'll be blended families. There'll be all kinds of shapes and sizes of families, all facing different pressures, all facing different experiences, and actually getting to know them, getting to know the struggles they're going through, and hearing from them. Remember all that comment that we got back about hearing from parents. Really important to then put in place the practical support that they need to be a help. It might be that we even need to signpost them towards other sources of practical help and advice. So, you know, if they're struggling financially, maybe we could link them in with Christians Against Poverty. Or if they're struggling relationally, then Care for the Family can offer some support and help there, for example. Or even if they're just struggling with how to support their child and to get through this difficult time with their child, maybe even the Additional Needs Alliance and the hive mind of 2,500 folk that are there can help to provide some thoughts as well. It can help families to change that narrative that maybe, you know, that there's a more positive way of working through lockdown, and for churches that they're not hearing from and they're not getting anything from, to be able to engage with them and give them that practical support, that practical baseline help they need, so that they can then start to think about spiritual development and feeding for themselves and also for their children as well. So let's think about the practical stuff first. Let's get that in place. Let's listen to families and respond to what they're telling us. And then we're in a better place to be able to go on and look at spiritual development after that. So I'm going to hand over to Debbie now, who's going to share her thoughts for the next few minutes on, on her take on this question.
Great, thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. It's good to be with you this afternoon. I am a foster carer together with my husband, Jason, and we currently have 2 boys with us long term, and they both have additional needs. And as we mentioned by Kay already, I volunteer for a charity, a Christian charity called Home for Good, and we help to raise awareness of fostering adoption across the country. We support families involved in fostering adoption, and we equip churches, children's workers, people who are working to support families with understanding the needs of care experienced children. So when I think about nurturing faith in the context of fostering and adoption, I think I need to be aware of my child's story. So I need to consider their trauma history, their relationships with significant people, maybe their primary caregivers, their internal working model, we'll talk about that in a moment, and their move or moves into the different foster families or into an adoptive family. So we know that all care experienced children have experienced some level of trauma and loss, and trauma impacts our brains and our bodies. Our stress response system goes into overdrive when we experience constant trauma, and it is constant. It's months and years of trauma. And this in turn affects our brain development and function. So when a child joins our family, or maybe joins your church or your group, we know that on the inside they are hurting and they are carrying the impact of this trauma. And that's on the inside, but on the outside you will see it in terms of how they think, feel, behave and act around you. Often these children will have a diagnosed additional needs such as global developmental delay or ADHD, autism, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. In fact, there are over 500 conditions, diseases and disorders that are attributed to adverse childhood experiences, abuse and neglect. So in terms of our relationships, we know that all of us have a basic need for attachment. And this is the biological drive from birth to seek proximity to a protective adult for survival, usually our parents. However, a child who lives with a caregiver who is abusive or neglectful will learn that relationships are hurtful, rejecting and dangerous. So they have a distorted view of attachment, and they may then develop what we call an attachment difficulty or disorder. And when a child has such a disorder, they reflect non-attachment, and you see an absence of attachment behaviour. So they might find it really hard, for example, to seek comfort from others, from God, whoever. And then I need to consider my child's internal working model. So this is the thing that governs how we mentally represent our attachment relationships, and it forms our sense of self, of others, and the world around us. We know that traumatic prenatal and early life experiences, as well as breaks in those attachments that we talked about, negatively impact our internal working model, and they cause us to have difficulties in the areas of relationship, behaviour, and personality. Children with a negative internal working model absolutely believe that they are bad. They blame themselves for what has happened to them. They feel high levels of shame. And they see others and the world around them as dangerous, unpredictable, and scary. So they often live in high levels of fear. So when a child with this kind of package, this history, comes into our family, into our home, or into your church, they bring that story with them. And as Christians, we, I guess, are trying to live out our faith in the way that we welcome them and parent them. And we need support with this. And this has been really heightened in the time of lockdown. And the children need a community around them that is inclusive and compassionate. That's why one of the aims of Home for Good is to equip the church to be that welcoming, supportive place. The church really living out what it means to be family. So our eldest boy absolutely loves church. He's been going for 7.5 years, and he engages with it brilliantly, and he prays at night, and it's such a joy to listen to him. And he loves taking part in all the stuff that we do as a church. Our youngest, he's been with us for about a year. He's autistic, and he was kind of new to our church and finds social engagement quite tricky, but absolutely adores Teslas, the electric vehicles. I absolutely knew nothing about Teslas, but I found out a lot more since. And he takes his toy Tesla with him to church when we used to meet up. And he would use that as a way of engaging with people. So he would present the toy car and have a conversation using the car. And our church family have been great in just connecting with him that way. So I guess when it comes to nurturing faith in our children in this context of fostering and adoption, we need to think about all those factors: their trauma, their relationships that they've had in the past, their internal working model, and where they are now, their family context within fostering and adoption. And then consider how this might affect their ability to believe that there is a God, that God loves them, that God forgives, that God cares about them, God understands them and accepts them, that God is their perfect Father. So perhaps instead of starting with the question, how can we nurture faith in our child, we need to go back to the beginning. You may or may not know everything about a child's story. A lot of it will be confidential if you're not their family. But you can ask how you can connect, how you can draw alongside our children and help them heal, so that we together can gently and sensitively challenge their core beliefs about themselves, others, and the world around them, and help them trust the God who made them and invites them into his perfect, loving, and eternal family, who sees their shame and guilt and frees them from this burden and presents them holy and unblemished as his dearly loved children. And then finally, I think we need to help the parents and the carers of children with a trauma history. I have found it really hard because I read stories, case histories of a lot of children, and it's really, really hard to understand how such evil things can be allowed to happen, and then to see the outliving of that trauma in my home every day. Fostering and adoption is an absolute privilege and a joy. We love it, and parenting our children, whether they stay for a few days or for many years, has taught me so much about how God parents me. But I have a lot more questions, and I guess I've lost that naivety that I had in my pre-fostering days. And I've been exposed to the brokenness of our society, and that's really hard. And I sometimes wish that I could share with my church what we carry, but we can't. So my faith is nurtured when somebody helps me to keep my eyes focused on Jesus in the depths of all this brokenness, to cling on to hope and to celebrate the joys, and to remember that our story with our children is not yet finished.
Thank you so much, Debbie. I'm going to carry on from that. The first thing I actually want to say is a lot of what we need to do is to be the oxygen mask for these parents. Now, you've all probably been on a plane where you're told that you need to put your own oxygen mask on before you put the oxygen mask of your child. This is what we need to be for our families. And everything that Mark and Debbie have said has been being the oxygen mask for the parents, the grown-ups, whoever is caring for those children. And when anxiety and stress is really high within the family, sometimes what we're providing for the parents will just help them to do something simple in the nurturing of faith. It might not look like reading the Bible and praying every day. It might just look like love and the sound of worship in the background, whatever that sounds like. And sometimes giving enough oxygen to the grown-ups to be able to say sorry to a child when they've lost their temper with them, because that can do an awful lot. Now, I hope you don't mind, but I'm actually going to talk to you as if you're parents, to try and show you some of the advice that you can be giving to families. Just bearing in mind that many of these families are going to need to stay in lockdown longer than many others because of the changes and the stress and everything that that brings with it. So here's the first one. Do not compare yourself to other people. This is your family, this is your faith walk, and the only person that needs to know about it is God. And he understands the situation. He understands the stress. He understands the brokenness that might be there. So it's between you and God. We all compare, don't we? I do it as well. The other thing is to create a safe space, just one little area in your home that can be your safe God space. It can be a table, a chair, a pop-up tent if you've got the space, a blanket fort underneath the dining room table if you have one. Any sort of space, but it's a space that you and your children create together, decorate together and put things in. Now, your children may need a little bit of guidance on things that might help, so think through the things that calm your children down. Now, when I'm working with large groups of children, I keep a whole supply of calming tools, and I've actually helped a child with a glitter stick. I've had one sit there looking at a glitter stick for 3 hours for a whole afternoon underneath a table with a blanket over it. It was what they needed in that God space. It could be anything they can fiddle with. I hate these. It could be something that you can tell a story with, like a finger puppet. I like to keep Lego, plasticine and Scrabble. They're brilliant things for helping with prayers. If you've got a child that needs calming, keep the calming things in there, but you might have a child that needs to be active even in that quiet, safe space. That's fine. Put it next to a wall so they can do some wall press-ups. I always find that's a really good tool. Have a Bible that is accessible to them. If you signed up for this, you will get an email afterwards, and there will be links to where you can find different sorts of accessible Bibles. The Brick Bible, the Minecraft Bible, there's all sorts of things out there. I sometimes wish there was a Tesla Bible for those children that like Teslas. The devotions, use what works for your child. Lots of people are saying, use this, use that. But if that doesn't work for your child, it's fine, don't compare. You might want to use a story from the Bible that's accessible for your child. You might want to go to YouTube and find the Brick Bible, but do check them first. Some of them are a little bit racy. loads of things on Minecraft Bible stories. Just find what sits comfortably with your child and find an activity-based prayer to do together. So we're not sitting down with our hands together and saying our prayers, but something they can do, something they can fiddle with and think about. If your child is reluctant, don't turn it into a battle. Step away and allow them to just carry on. If we turn this into a battle, we turn it into a battle between them and God, and that we really don't want. So just let them calm and entice them. Now, enticing can look like picking up the brick Bible, looking at the pictures, start reading, and then just showing the pictures and saying, oh, look at this. This is interesting, and drawing them in. In the prayer time, you'll actually find a lot of children need to know the rules. They'll need to know that it's safe, and they need to watch an adult doing it. So do it. If you've got a child that likes lining things up, I know many children that will line up cars, or they'll line up Lego. Do it. Use it as a prayer activity. And as you're lining up the Lego bricks, say, oh, I've got a blue one and I need to, what I'm trying to do is to say thank you to God for something that's blue. Can you think of something that's blue that we can say thank you for? So it's just enticing them in so they can see how to do it alongside you. And then you may find that they will go into that space you've set up and do it for themselves. Just keep changing things around. Now, again, if you're putting out an activity to do, to pray or to learn, let them change the rules. Now, you've probably got 1 or 2 or 3 children that might be wanting to join in with this activity. You've said, this is how we do it. Let me show you how we do it. If one wants to change it that way, another that way, and another that way, then let them. Because that means the Holy Spirit is working in their heart to say, this is how I want you to view this. This is their way of saying, I wonder, this is what I am thinking about God at this moment in time. So let them just flourish and grow spiritually in that way. Have a little box that they can put prayers in. There might not be ones that want to speak. We have a lot of children that have selective mutism. They won't want to speak their prayers. They might want to draw them, write them down. Many other children will just scribble. God knows what they're praying. We don't have to know it. Just leave it with God. And I think I want to end my section just by saying you may not see what spiritual growth is happening in your child at all. And that is absolutely fine. We don't need to know. All we need to do is to pray that the Spirit would be active in their hearts and they would know God's love in whatever their circumstances of birth, of illness, of disability or additional needs. God's got it. Back to you, Mark.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kay. Thank you, Debbie, as well. Yeah, really hoping that this is resonating with you folk, and do keep sending your chat comments in. In a moment, we're going to go and into our breakout groups. So I'm just going to quickly put a slide up to share a little bit about what we're going to be doing there. But whilst we do that, Sue, any comments in the chat that you'd like to share with us?
I think you've all been so inspiring that there's not been much chatting going on compared to our previous sessions. A lot of people really appreciated Debbie's sharing. Jess said breaking it was that some churches really seem to be just ignoring families during lockdown. And Dave pointed out that it really is the relational DNA of a church. You know, some churches are going the extra mile to keep connected with everybody, whereas others are finding volunteers and their regular key volunteers are leaving the church because there's not been any communication. So those are the key points.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sue. And do keep sharing and in the chat anything that you'd like to talk about. We're going to go into the breakout rooms now. So you should, in a few moments, automatically be sent on your way to your breakout room. These are the questions to think about. What are your aspirations for for your church, for the families that you meet with and those that you'd like to meet with? What are your hopes now during lockdown still, but also as we emerge out of lockdown as well? What does it look like for you, for those families that we've been talking about? And what's one difficulty that you can see that could make that harder for you? In your breakout groups, pick one person to be your sort of spokesperson, if you like, somebody to gather your thoughts together. And when we come back in about 10 or 12 minutes time, then plug those thoughts, just a summary of them, into the chat so they can be shared with everybody else. So you're going to have about 10 to 12 minutes to think about these questions, have a conversation about what we've been looking at so far, and then when we come back, have one of your team in your breakout room just summarize very briefly, perhaps a couple of sentences, what you have concluded, so that can be shared with everybody else. Don't forget to unmute yourself when you get into your breakout room, otherwise nobody will be able to hear you speak. Yeah, Ollie, can you send everybody on our way, please? Yes.
Great, I'll do that then.
That's down to me to welcome everybody back. I hope this group is really good. Do sum up your comments in the chat. Try to keep them anonymous because we do collate the comments and put them out afterwards. But it'd be great to hear what your aspirations are and what you're struggling with. All of those things will help us to form what we're doing later on. Helps us in the Additional Needs Alliance to see where we need to put more support as well. Going to be heading into the next session now, three-way thinking. This one is actually looking at what we do online or not online, and I have the joy of going first. And I'm not going to talk about online. What I'm going to be talking about is what we do if your child can't go online. Because I think everybody is going to have children that won't be returning to church or be part of a church that are not putting on any children's work until after Christmas or even later than that. So if you've got a child with additional needs, what are you going to do? Well, biggest thing that families say, that no matter what happens, can you stay in touch? I think that came out clearly in everything that Mark was saying right at the very beginning. Could I just ask people to mute themselves? Thank you very much. Sorry, I got muted by accident there. Listen to what parents have got to say about their children. What they say, they are the experts in all of this. They know what reaches their child. And many are saying that what's going out, if there is anything going out, doesn't reach their child. But somebody's bothered to make contact. And that is sometimes the most important thing. If a child can't get online, do consider a pack, but chatting to the parents, find out what the child needs, what they can access. Give resources, give ideas, but don't give a long list. Just give one or two things at a time. And if you go back a week or two later and they say that didn't work, that's fine. Find a few more things, just finding what the child feels comfortable. Thing I found most useful, Freddos. What I've actually done is I've asked parents what's their favourite thing to eat, what is their favourite thing, you know, that thing they obsess about all the time, and then try to put everything around that. And within their pack that they get, there's something like a Freddo. I've actually resolved arguments on camps with a Freddo. They're amazing. Now, the child might not remember the spiritual input of the pack you've taken, but they'll remember the relationship created by the chocolate. And that is really important. Your relationship to the child and your relationship to the grown-ups in that family as well. A large number have really struggled with church being online, but a huge quantity have loved it as well. So remember that we need to keep things going online, but the children that are going to be returning back to church, especially those that are on the autistic spectrum, ADHD, any child that struggles with change, you will need to take videos and photos of the changes within the church, put it on your church website, put it in a pack, take it round, have a conversation in the garden or over the garden gate that just says that there's a lot of changes. And then arrange, if possible, for that child to come into the church before the rest of the church and walk them through, socially distanced of course, walk them through all of those changes. So when they come on the day, they know exactly what to do, which door to use, because it's going to be the different one to the one that they've used before, inevitably. And the whole experience will be much calmer for them, for their grown-ups and everybody around them. I'm going to hand over to Debbie now.
Okay, so thinking then again about the fostering and adoption world, we sent out a survey a few days ago just to kind of get a glimpse into the experiences of some of the foster and adoptive families that we engage with about online church during this time of lockdown. So for some, online church has become their new routine and actually enabled greater participation for them. It's helped to see familiar faces on screen and to stick to a regular structure. So we know that some children with developmental trauma do struggle with things like object permanence. One family said that their child assumes that a person is dead if she doesn't see or hear from them for a while. Another family said that they were able to access church more than they did before because in normal services they've had to go with their children to children's groups due to their additional needs. For others, the children didn't connect so well with the online content. One family said that the YouTube services were a remote experience and their son failed to engage, while Zoom was more of a community experience and their son would listen. Another said that their foster son can become aggressive after watching anything on screen. And still another that their children don't cope well on Zoom at all. One family reported that they did their own story time and chats, that resources for the children were not always available or age appropriate, or that they required lots of writing. For us, and I mentioned this a little bit before, our boys love church and we think they've engaged reasonably well with the online services. We are really strict about our routine. We have the same routine every week and we always have an activity planned for them. Usually we have resources that have been emailed to us by our Sunday club leader, so we just print those off and they can do those. We are really cautious about our boys appearing on social media. In fostering adoption, there's a lot of rules about confidentiality, protecting identities, that type of thing. So that limits their participation. However, this week we have an online summer camp that's been run by our church, and we have managed to get our eldest boy, who has ADHD, to take part by creating a pseudonym for him. A pseudonym is Captain Turtle. This involves him wearing a Ninja Turtle mask and carrying a Captain America shield. So his identity is pretty much obscured. Our younger child, who has autism, he says very little during church, but he clearly notices a lot. One morning after online church, he told me how much he enjoyed it. When I asked him why, he said it was because the man, who was a church leader, seemed so happy to see him. So all our children are unique, and there is clearly no one size fits all when engaging foster and adoptive families in church, whether that's online or anywhere. Flexibility is key, and a willingness to talk to the parents and carers about what helps or hinders their child and ways to support them. Even if no solution can be found, we always really appreciate being asked. I said earlier about how important it is to think about the child's story and how this will have impacted upon their brain development and function and the way they see themselves, others, and the world around them. So it's important to take into account the child's developmental, not just chronological age, and make resources appropriate for them. It's important to consider providing visual timetables and social stories, to think about facial expression and sensory overloads. A lot of our kids notice so much more than we think. They are hypervigilant. Some struggle with emotional literacy. They can be distracted or dysregulated by noises, smells, lights, temperatures, all sorts of things. Some things can remind them of difficult memories in their past and act as triggers. So talk to the parents or carers about anything that might be hard for them. And then don't assume that a child can sit and listen. They might need a little bit more flexible approach that allows for things like movement, like Kay's already said. And we know that movement is really good for regulating stress. And remember that kids in care, they often have very high levels of stress. So if or when your church's normal services resume, be understanding and aware of the heightened anxiety for children with adverse childhood experiences, and that transitioning back will take time and support. So provide a video introduction of the changes that the church has made or is planning to make, and make familiar faces available to greet the children. And then finally, whether it's online or face-to-face, make church a child's safe space. It's only really when a child feels safe, secure, calm, connected, and understood that they can start to really engage with faith conversations. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Debbie. Really, really good thoughts. Just to finish off this particular section, just thinking again of some of the comments that we got back from members of the different groups that we asked about things that were going well with the online provision that their family was engaging with. Talked about weekly material, talked about online kids church happening, Zoom craft, storytelling. Different things are working for different families and different children. There isn't a one size fits all that's really sort of resonating with everybody. And what that tells us, I suppose, is that we, as we've been talking about already, should be asking, should be not assuming. We should be contacting families and saying, hey, what's working for you? What can we do more of that you're really engaging with? And what are the things that just aren't working? And maybe we don't do so much of that. So helping families to be engaged with and on the journey with us, so that we're not doing children's work unto them, but we're doing children's work with them, is really, really important. But really, there's a once in a generation opportunity for us to get children's and youth work right during this time, isn't there? We've spent decades delivering age group related model of children's and youth work, where we split them up by their age, move them up by age group, and now we are looking at things differently because we're having to with online church. But it gives us an opportunity to assess that and think about that, and think about whether from the online church or the in-building church, that's actually the right way for us to do children's and youth work going forward. Just imagine if the last time you were at church, if you turned up and the first thing that the greeter on the door asked you was how old you were, and then fed you off down a particular route to a particular room, depending on your answer. You might have had somebody with you, but they were a different age to you, so they got sent somewhere else. And it would be confusing, and you wouldn't quite know what was happening. And would you come next week? Don't know. But that's what we've been doing for years, isn't it, for children? And what we're doing, a bit less of now, because we're looking at things differently from an online point of view. So what about if we started to think about the lessons we're learning in the online world and how we could apply those more to the in-building world when that happens as well, and very much as well, the two things working together. How about if we split children's work up, not by ages, but by interests, by shared values, shared ways of learning. Different learning styles come into play, different ways of doing things. We already do that for our adult congregations, don't we? We offer different groups that appeal to different demographics. We might have a sports ministry or a dance ministry. You might do a men's breakfast, or different parts of the thing that we do at church that meets the needs of different folk. How about doing that for the children and young people that we're engaging with as well, and starting doing that online? Some children will learn better through storytelling, creatively retelling the big story of the Bible in engaging ways, maybe through some drama that could be introduced. Some will get stuck into creative things, making things, whether it's a really carefully thought through craft activity, or as Kay was talking just now about Lego, or maybe it's art and painting and drawing that's the thing. Maybe they are budding musicians and want to get into creating some worship music together, or maybe they're really interested in tech and so they would like to explore the Bible world through something like Minecraft, for example. How about if instead of having our children organized by age group, we organize them by interest, by the things that they enjoy doing? And this works really, really well when we're thinking about children with a wide range of additional needs as well. If we can tap into their preferred learning style, if we can tap into the things that they enjoy and find interesting, then we're much more likely for them to engage and be a part of what's happening, and be wanting to influence that and develop that with us going forward. And it's a really great way of starting to think about how we do children's work in a different way, and it works really well online. We've got a golden chance to do this. Imagine if next time you're doing a Zoom session for all the children in your church, there was a brief beginning where everybody gathers, and then children can choose a breakout room to go into, and there's a storytelling breakout area where they can engage with story, maybe start to recreate it in a drama. There's a building breakout room where they can make things, and they could put a craft together, or they could build something in Lego. There's a worship breakout room where somebody who's a bit musically talented can lead the young people into maybe creating some new worship material together, or something wonderful like that. Different ways of engaging with the different styles of learning, the different interests that children and young people have. And to facilitate that and help that, we could send information around to families during the week to say, hey, if your child likes the craft zone, here's what we're going to be making on Sunday. Here's the stuff that you could gather together so that they can junk model the ark when we build that on Sunday. Or we're going to be telling the story of David and Goliath. Get your child to have something that could represent David and Goliath, something that represents the sling and maybe the pebbles that David held. Try and recreate the story that way. Or we're going to be in the worship zone this week learning about how to bring a story together into song. So if you've got an instrument, bring that, and we're going to make some music together. Different ways that children can engage. And maybe they could have 2 zones that they could access each week. So there's a bit of a break in the middle, and then they can try a different zone. But it's a great way of being able to help children to just engage with the big story of the Bible in ways that are accessible for them and that they really enjoy, and sets us up ready to continue to do this online, but also to think about how we could do that in building as well. Just to wrap up this bit, just wanted to share a quote from a leader of a church who's done this. They've already done this. And what they said is, we've been working with the arrangement of children's work being structured around interest groups instead of age groups. And this has worked so well, and especially for those children with additional needs. What I have noticed is that the children's understanding of what we teach them is greater, and they can translate the message for themselves. We've heard some awesome things from our children that make us want to cry. children hearing God's voice so much better. And this was like witnessing the voice of God speaking through so many. Needless to say, we're sticking with this method and looking for different ways that we can bring in more ideas. So think about that interest group based way of doing children's work. Maybe that's something that you could try as you are online, but also heading back towards your building as well. Now let me just share screen again so that we can move into our final part. Which is, who are we missing? And I think, Kay, you're going to lead us off on that.
Yeah, we've talked mainly about one side of additional needs and disability, but it's worth saying we do have children that can't see, can't hear, can't move, don't have the fine motor skills to do crafts, etc. We shouldn't be forgetting those either. So do join the Additional Needs Alliance if you're looking at a way to help a child that can't move very well or can't hear or can't see. Just go into that group and say, I've got this child, any ideas? And you'll find there's over 2,000 people that are there with experience and come back and talk to you and show you what you can do. Any other of our speakers got something that they think that we've missed? Eating disorders just popped up on my comment stream.
I think one thing I would just share really is an encouragement, which is so many of us, and particularly those of you that have joined this group, are already doing amazing stuff. So keep doing that and be encouraged in that work. Although there are many churches that aren't doing so well for the children that they're meeting with at this time, there are many churches that are doing a brilliant job, and many of them are represented here. So be encouraged, keep going, and thank you for all that you're doing.
Yeah, Debbie's just put in the comments about mental health of our children, not just those that are fostered and adopted, but we have a lot of children that are suffering from anxiety and all sorts of mental health things because of lockdown. If anybody wants to put in the comments somewhere they think is really useful for parents to go if their child has had mental health issues, that would be great.
Also, if as we are coming towards the last few moments of our session today, if there are any other questions that people have got, then do pop those in the box as well, and we'll try and answer those. We're also going to leave the session running for a bit beyond 3 o'clock, so we're not going to shut off bang on 3 o'clock. So there will still be an opportunity. If you've got questions, then do hang around and ask them. Yeah, we won't be finishing straight away. What I will do though is, as we've only got 3 or 4 minutes left, is if I share screen again for the last time, and just to bring us through to a few final thoughts. Kay, you're going to start us off on those.
Yeah, just to say we're really thankful for Children Worldwide for sponsoring this event and the previous two. Can highly recommend Children Worldwide. Go and give them a look. And if we go on to the next one, just a reminder that this is for free. To avoid having to put a charge on it next time, we'd really value people donating even just a small amounts. That would be really good. And the book, we've put the link in the chat, no problem. And it's a great book. And on to the next. Home for Good, do go and look them up. In the email that you get after, you will get a link straight to the church resources, which are absolutely awesome. In the Additional Needs Alliance, we will be sharing any of their training days as well.
And just a reminder of the Additional Needs Alliance website, which has got loads of resources in it. We've actually been bringing together a list of accessible churches, and we've got, I think, 67 in our map and directory there across the country. Churches that, for all kinds of different reasons, are accessible and inclusive and are creating belonging for the families that gather there. Your church might be there, and if that's the case, then that's brilliant. If you're looking for a church, then go and try the accessible churches list, because you might find that there's a church near you that you could try. If you are representing a church and you're not on the list yet, but actually you would like to be, and there are things that you can offer that make your church a more accessible, inclusive church, then if you go to the website, go to the Accessible Churches link, you'll see that there's a green box that you can press, which takes you to a registration form, and you can fill in your church's details and then be added to the church list and directory, which means that families can then find you. And we've had lots and lots of occasions where families have found a church that's really worked for them by using that page. So do have a look at that. Do come and join us on the website, on the Facebook group. As we were saying earlier, there's 2,500 of us there, but each one is welcomed, and we really do love to hear from everybody that's a part of that group. So do come and join the Additional Needs Alliance Facebook group. It would be great to see you there. As we really do come in to finish this session, and it's the third of our series of sessions, just want to say thank you for those of you that are here today, those of you that have been to maybe 2 or 3 of these events. It's been really, really good to see you and to engage with all that you've brought to these sessions. We are, as we've suggested during this session, looking to run some more. We'll be sending details out as we develop the themes for those, and we're looking to do some stuff back end of September and into October. If you've got some suggestions for things that we could run a session like this about, then again, pop it in the chat or contact one of us if you've got our contact details, and we'll add that into the mix. We're going to chat a bit more next week when a few of us gather, just to think about what that looks like for the future. And we'd love to hear from you. We want this to very much be meeting the needs of folk out there. So do come and share your comments in the chat, or contact one of us if you've got an idea. But thank you for being here. Thank you for all that you've done to make today work. Thanks to everybody behind the scenes who's been sending us off into the right places and making sure that all the technology is working. So thanks Ollie, thanks Dave, thanks Sue. Maybe a final thought from Sue. Any chat that you want to briefly share with us before we wrap up for the day?
I think just a couple of the aspirations that have come through from the groups, breakout groups. Some of the aspirations are that the church would become standard church, that we wouldn't have to just have this discussion because it would be the norm, that we need to build relationships and become more welcoming. And some of the difficulties I think that the churches have faced has been partly as a lack of vision from leadership, partly because people just haven't got the capacity, churches haven't got the capacity to be doing everything they'd like to. Where do they put their energy? And the concern that some churches are putting children in general, not only those with needs, on the back burner as they're looking to come out of lockdown, and the concern about that. A lot of people have put resources up on there. We will share with you all towards the end of the week.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sue. And again, thanks, everyone. We'll bring things to a conclusion now for this seminar session and for this series of 3. But as I said, we'll hang around for 10 minutes. So if anybody's got anything else they just want to pop in the chat, or anything you want to ask, then we'll be here for another 10 minutes or so before we close the room down. Thanks again for being here, and hopefully see you next time.
Thank you.